Welcome to the City of Troy Planning Commission meeting on April 13th, 2021. Tonight's meeting is being conducted remotely using the GoToMeeting remote meeting platform. This is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For those watching tonight's meeting on television or on the city's YouTube channel, we welcome you. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. Our first item of business after the roll call will be a resolution temporarily suspending and modifying the Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure, which will permit us to proceed with this meeting virtually and to afford an opportunity for us to receive public comment. We have made every effort to ensure that the meeting adheres to the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. We have provided opportunities for public comment via telephone and email prior to the meeting, and all public comment, if any, will be shared with the Planning Commission. At this time, I'd like Kathy Sarnicki to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Here.
Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Roush.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now I'm going to read the resolution, and then someone could move it and second it. Whereas Public Act 228 of 2020 MCL 15.263A 1B permits public hearings to be held by electronic means where a local state of emergency has been declared. Whereas the Troy City Council declared a local state of emergency through resolution 2021-04-048 because it determined that an in-person meeting would detrimentally increase exposure of board members and the general public to COVID-19. Therefore, be it resolved that as allowed by Planning Commission Rules of Procedure, Article 4, Section 6 of the Troy Planning Commission hereby temporarily suspends the requirement of holding a meeting at the Troy City Hall and allows all Troy Planning Commission members to electronically participate in any Planning Commission meeting until the Troy City Council lifts the local state of emergency or through December 31st, 2021, whichever is earlier. Members participating electronically will be considered present and in attendance at the meeting and may participate in the meeting as if physically present. However, members must avoid using email, texting, instant messaging, or other such electronic forms of communication to make a decision or deliberate toward a decision. Resolved as allowed by Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure, Article 10, the Troy Planning Commission hereby temporarily suspends and allows two methods of receiving public comment for virtual meetings. One, public comment can be submitted for the Planning Commission meeting by sending an email to planning@troymi.gov. Timely received email into record by reference and will be distributed to Planning Commission members for review and consideration. Emails will be considered timely if received prior to 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Two, public comments can also be submitted by calling the following phone number and leaving a voicemail message, 248-524-1305. Timely received voicemail messages will be played during the meeting. Recorded voicemail messages will be considered timely if received prior to the 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Recorded voicemail messages will be limited to 3 minutes each. This time, I'd like a member of the commission to move the resolution to suspend and modify our bylaws so that we may conduct tonight's meeting via video conference link. I have a motion.
Other, come on. I move it.
Mr. Rahman makes the motion. A second, please.
Second.
Second from Mr. Lambert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson,
Before we do roll call, is there any discussion? I know there were some people who emailed me with questions, and I want to make sure that we get it right.
Sure.
You know, what I proposed is the suggestions. These are your bylaws. So I just want to, if there's any discussion, now is the time for discussion. If not, that's fine. I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with
Any
the changes that we
discussion
made.
from the commissioners? Ms. Parakis.
Yes, thanks. I wasn't exactly sure when was the appropriate time to talk about it, but I did want to make sure that I do believe that proper notice of the meeting was given, so we're clear on that. But I do have a concern about public comment, and I do want to make sure that that we feel that tonight the public has been afforded the appropriate opportunity to provide public comment, because it went from being able to attend a meeting in person at 7 p.m. tonight to having an email or a phone message at 4 p.m. today. And I don't know if the word got out on that, and if people were able to quickly change their plans to make sure that their public comment was heard. So I think that we need to be sensitive to that. And I don't know if that means that we need to postpone any decisions tonight, or I mean, we can see how it goes and see what kind of comments we got as well.
Thank you. Mr. Sabaton, please comment.
Yeah, now is probably a good time to talk about the approach that we would like the Planning Commission to consider. Ultimately, it's you're the board members, you're the body, and you're the ones who are going to be, you know, we're going to have to be comfortable with this approach. But Planning Commissioner Parakis raises a really good point. So I'd like to just summarize what we'd like to do moving forward as we address public meetings and public hearings. So for tonight's meeting, during tonight's meeting, we would like to present and discuss each item as we typically do. So after the presentation by staff and the applicant, we would open the public hearing for each item, reference the emails that were submitted for the public record, and play each voicemail. We would not take any action on the items tonight, and we'd actually leave the public hearings open, each of the 3 public hearings. So that would have the effect of essentially postponing each item for 2 weeks until the April 27th, 2021 meeting. This would provide an opportunity for residents who were planning to attend the meeting today, who were given very short notice or weren't able to get any notice, to provide public comment between now and April 27th, or attend the meeting virtually on the 27th. So let's talk about the next Planning Commission meeting in 2 weeks on April 27th. So at that meeting, we would use the Zoom remote meeting platform rather than the GoToMeeting platform that we're presently using. The reason for that is Zoom is very similar to GoToMeeting, but it seems to offer some additional tools for helping to manage public hearings, such as waiting rooms, and there's a hand raise function that can help the chairman manage the meeting. We'll be able to solicit public comment during the public meeting in real time on the 27th. So the intent would be that all of the emails that have been submitted so far, plus any new emails, would be included in the Planning Commission agenda in 2 weeks, and we would play any new voicemails at that meeting. The meeting would be broadcast live online on the city's YouTube channel. It will also be broadcast live on cable TV. So people that have a computer or don't have a computer will be able to follow the meeting live. Residents will be able to participate in the public hearings in real time using the Zoom platform or using their telephone. Zoom also accepts telephone calls. So again, we've got coverage from people, or the ability to participate for people who have computers or don't have computers. We would explain all this on the website and using on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter, provided, of course, the Planning Commission agrees with this approach. We would test the Zoom platform with the planning commission members prior to the next planning commission meeting. We'd allow the chairman an opportunity to get comfortable with the various tools that it has to offer. So moving forward from 2 weeks and onward, planning commission meetings would be held virtually on Zoom until such time that we can meet safely in person. And this would also include public hearings. And the intent of all this is to find a balance between moving forward with reviewing development applications during a pandemic, but also accommodating safe and effective input from residents. So that's our proposal, Mr. Chairman, and we're very willing to discuss this and get your feedback.
Okay. Any comments from the commission on what Mr. Salvadant just reviewed? Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yeah, I had one question, Mr. Salvadant. So, have you considered doing something similar to what you'd originally planned, and instead of having us present, us being on Zoom and doing the public meeting for the public itself, or is again because of the COVID, you didn't want to put those people in the room?
That's exactly what Mr. Rouch. It's purely for safety reasons. We felt it was in the best interest of public safety to accommodate attendance and comments virtually at this time.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Roush, that's a good question. I think I don't know, I think Mr. Lambert, you watched city council meeting last night. I don't know who else did, but I think sort of the direction that city council was going, and they didn't want a large number of people gathering at the community center or anywhere. So, who knows what will happen, in the future if we can try to attempt that hybrid solution that we had, but at least going forward in the near future, as long as this local state of emergency is in existence, we're not going to do anything hybrid like that.
And my only question would be, and the reason I've raised this issue in itself is because of the sophistication of dealing with Zoom and all of those people via phone calls and online. And is it going to take some training for our chairman to be able to manage that? It sounds like it's going to be quite the feat.
We have every confidence that Chairman Krent will be able to handle it. And we, like Mr. Salvadant said, we will do some test runs with Mr. Krent in advance of the meeting, because we all would like it to go smoothly as best as it can.
Thank you, Mr. Trent, if you're willing to take up that challenge.
Yeah. Mr. Lambert. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask staff then, are you suggesting that tonight we, after we hear all the appropriate input from both the petitioners and from the public that we've received so far, that we postpone action on all of those items to the next meeting?
That is correct.
Okay.
2 weeks. 2 weeks to accommodate input from people who may want to participate in this process.
To be
Okay,
clear,
thank you.
we're not directing
Yeah.
planning commission to do anything
You're
specific.
suggesting.
We are just making a recommendation based on, due process, notice and opportunity to be heard. So again, we're not directing anything to happen specifically.
Mr. Faison.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. So we're going to hear the presentations today, have dialogue around them today, but not act upon them. In 2 weeks, are we going to hear those presentations again? Or how will we manage the meeting 2 weeks from now?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the intent would be to provide a detailed presentation typical of what we usually do this evening. That video is going to be made available on YouTube for anyone who isn't watching live, who wants to see it. Anyone can watch it and catch up on the presentation by staff and by the applicant and on all the dialogue. And then in 2 weeks, it would simply be a summary, a very, very brief summary of what the projects are. We're not doing the same presentation twice.
That was my question. Thank you.
And it's helpful that everybody is present tonight, so it's not as if someone is missing out today. So I'm comfortable with that, as long as Planning Commission is comfortable with it.
Okay. Any other comments before the roll call?
Just a summary, just a very brief, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
We're trying our best to find this balance. This latest variant is really, has really been catastrophic for the state of Michigan. We're trying our best to continue to move forward, but not at the price of safety of residents and staff members of the Planning Commission.
Yeah, totally, 100% agree. You know, it's just our state has the rate of infection has gone up dramatically in this last couple of weeks, and I agree we should just stay in our homes for a while. So that said, any other comments from the commission? Seeing no more, the roll call, please. Ms. Sarnicki.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krant,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Miss Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. And next item is the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Mr. Faison, second,
I'll
please.
second.
Move.
Ms. Parakis, seconds. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Krant,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Miss Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our March 23rd, 2021 meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Lambert approves. Second, please. Mr. Tagle. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Miss Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krant.
Yes.
Motion
Next.
carried, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment for items submitted by email or telephone message. Are there any?
Mr. Chairman, what we were proposing to do, because all of the comments were related to an item, was to either play the phone messages or reference the emails at the appropriate time for each of the items.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I
It
think
looks like-
Chairman Trent is frozen. His
Yeah, that's what I
video
was
is
going
frozen.
to say.
Yeah.
Mr. Crunch just called me to tell me he's rebooting again. He's going to need another minute. Mr. Lambert, you may want to start warming up your pipes.
Okay. All right.
I was just
Just-
gonna say, we may want the vice chair to step in.
Just in case. He's back.
Sorry, folks, for the delay. Okay, where were we now? Public hearing, number 6. Preliminary, everyone can hear me, I take it? Raise your hand or, good, thank you. Public hearing, preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2020-0013, proposed the Meadows of Troy, one family residential cluster, east of John R., north of Square Lake Road, parcel 88-20-01-300-016, section 1, currently zoned R1D, one family residential district. I imagine Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savanant will take over.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if for some reason my computer died again, please carry on the presentation. Don't let me interrupt it. I will follow it as soon as I get back on within a minute or so.
Thank you. Appreciate the heads up, Mr. Chairman. Tonight, the first item before you is a site condominium referred to as the Meadows of Troy. A little background about the site and the development. The applicant is proposing a 31-unit detached condominium development in the form of a cluster orientation. The applicant is purchasing approximately 12 acres of an 80-acre site from the Troy School District. The entire 80 acres is outlined in red here. The applicant is proposing the 12 acres that are adjacent to Square Lake Road. Once the property is split, the remaining 68 acres will remain under the control of the school district. The future use of those 68 acres is currently unknown at this point. With regards to surrounding land use and zoning, the site is zoned R1D. To the north is the Sanctuary Golf Course, which is zoned CF, Community Facility. To both the south, east, and west is traditional subdivision R1D, one family residential zoning. The site plan is in front of you. The applicant is proposing 31 units. 25 units were shown in the parallel plan that we require to establish the base density. The applicant is seeking 6 additional units by providing an excess of 30% open space. The open space that you will note is the area that I'm going to kind of outline here. It's on the northern end of the site. It includes a detention pond as well as regulated wetlands, as well as a 13 space public parking lot that will be used as a trailhead for future trails within this area. The site includes 2 points of access off of Square Lake. The Planning Commission this probably brings up some memories for many of the members of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission previously approved a cluster development on this exact site a few years ago. It was done by Mondrian Development. You'll notice the basic layout is the same of the proposed project as what was previously approved. So the outline of the development is the same with the donation of open space to the northern portion of the site. The difference between what was approved and what is being proposed is the current proposal includes approximately 8 more units, but we do note that the actual house size of what's being proposed is a 1.5 story, and it's a much smaller in scale and a more desirable housing product than what the Mondrian plan was approved, which was large 2-story colonials that would have taken up basically the footprint of the entire lot, which is a much smaller footprint. So the applicant is asking for 8 more units, but at a much smaller scale in terms of house size. The other difference between the Mondrian and the Robertson Brothers is the Robertson Brothers had purchased only 12 acres from the Park District, and they're preserving 6 acres. The Mondrian purchased, it was our understanding they purchased the entire site from the school district and was going to donate it to the Six Rivers Land Conservancy. And so that hasn't gone through. So again, those are the remaining 68 acres of the school district that's not being purchased is still unknown what the future of that's going to be. The site plan itself does comply with all R1D requirements, except they are seeking one deviation with regards to side yard setback. Under the cluster ordinance, the separation between houses has to be 15 feet. They're asking for a deviation from up to 5 feet all the way up to 3 feet of deviation. So they're asking for 10 feet between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're asking for 11 feet for these houses here in the middle, and they're asking for 12 feet rather than the 15 feet for a few of these houses on the side, and then those that front on Square Lake. In conversation with the applicant, we did express initially some concern about what I like to refer to as kind of a towering effect or kind of a tunnel effect, where you have large homes with a very narrow separation between the two. In conversation with the applicant, and that's why I showed the elevation, they note that it's only going to be a 1.5 story building with this very steep pitch roof will actually allow for more light and air to in between the buildings. So we don't have necessarily a concern with the deviation as requested. As noted, this is a desired housing product that the city has been trying to achieve in the past. It includes a 1.5 story with a first floor master bedroom and bathroom. The applicant, as noted previously, is constructing a 13 space gravel parking lot to the north of the site that will serve as a trailhead. One of the questions that we asked the applicant was where are the trails going to be located within this will be set forth in the conservation easement. And will all the trails be within the 6 acres they're preserving, or will it also be extended into the 68 acres that are not being preserved? And the applicant notes that they hope to put some trails within the 68 acres, but if not, they would put the entirety of the trail system within their own particular control of their site. That would be something that if this does move forward and based on direction from the Planning Commission, that we would work out as part of the cluster ordinance that goes to the City Council. I want to be very clear on the amount of open space. It was a little unclear in the applicant's application and maybe a little unclear in my actual memo. The applicant noted that they're providing 30% open space. The reason why they noted 30 because that got them to their wanted and desired density of 31 units. In actuality, they're providing 42% open space if you include the area of the detention pond, and 52% if you, 42% if you exclude the area of the detention pond, and 52% if you do include the detention pond. So they are well above the minimum threshold to get the open space cluster requirement as well as the density being sought. Within the open space itself, it's outlined in red. Again, it includes the preservation of regulated wetlands and woodlands, and it includes the 13 space parking lot and trailhead access. This parking lot and trailhead will be public and will be allowed to be used by any resident and non-resident and not just exclusive to the development itself. The applicant is proposing 3 base elevations. They're all very similar with a few details based on some of the styles. It's a European elevation, a farmhouse elevation, and a traditional elevation. I do want to note again, they're all 1.5 stories. They all have a pitched steep roof, allow for additional light air between the houses themselves. In the right-hand corner is the elevations, the other 3 sides of the elevation, just for your consideration. So in summary, the applicant is asking for 6 additional units that would be permitted under the parallel plan. In exchange for that, they're providing over 40% of open space, which allows for the preservation of natural resources and inclusion of site amenities. They are allowing for a private road, which allows for additional buffer than a public road would allow. They're providing an open space collar around the perimeter to adjacent properties for additional open space. They're providing a long-term protection and preservation of natural features. They are preserving 227 regulated trees and a regulated wetland. The site is adequately served by public services. They are providing that, as I know, that parking lot and trailhead, and perhaps most importantly, they're providing a housing product with a first floor master bedroom and bath that has been desired by the community. So in summary, we do find it meets the requirements of the cluster, and it provides a development and a benefit that would not be achievable if this were redeveloped under your traditional R1D development. So that being said, we are recommending approval with the cluster plan to the City Council, provided the applicant provide a new assessment of the regulated wetland, provide a maintenance agreement for the parking lot, and provide an easement over Turtle Woods for access to the parking lot. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any comments by the commission to Mr. Carlisle or Brent? I'll go ahead, Mr. Faison.
Yeah, just two quick questions for Mr. Carlisle. Do you have a portrayal of the parallel plan?
I don't have one in my presentation. It was in your packet. Let me find out what page it was in your packet. Brent, if you know off the top of your head, feel free to jump in.
And then the next question I had was, I know you said in the comments that the school district will control the 68 acres and it's unclear how they will be used, but I thought somewhere in the packet it talked about them preserving those 68 acres. Is that a discussion that's underway?
So I asked Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, the parallel plan is on page 32 of your packet.
Okay.
Thank you.
The reason Mr. Faison, the reason I asked was because the initial plan that was approved by Mondrian included the purchase of the entire site, and that all of the remaining 68 acres were dedicated to the land conservancy. This obviously was a different plan. They were only purchasing 12 of those 68 acres. So the question that I had was, well, what happens to the remaining 68 acres, and specifically, how would that affect the trails and the proposed trailhead, and would the trails simply be only within the 6 acres? In discussions or conversation I had with the applicant, who relayed that comment to the Troy School District, the Troy School District just said that it's their plan to keep that 68 acres undeveloped. But as far as I know, there's been no agreement or no commitment to that from the school district. And so we'll take them at their word, but we don't have control of that 68 acres. The city does not, and it could be used for future development. But I know a member of the school district is here, and they may be able to answer that in more specifics if you have more details for that.
Okay. Anyone else for Mr. Carlisle?
I have a question for Mr. Carlisle. Mr. Carlisle, did you mention in your presentation that the Mondrian properties earlier had purchased or proposed to purchase the entire area owned by the Troy District and School District?
I think I mentioned that a few times. If I wasn't clear, the original Mondrian property was purchasing the entire site from the school district and donating the area that they were not developing was going to be donated to a conservation group.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
And Mr. Carlisle, do you know what happened? Why it didn't go through?
Mr. Rahman, I don't know what happened, and really, it really shouldn't be under the purview of this application. We have an application in front of us. It's our job to respond to this application. I can't speak to, and I don't know if the applicant can or will speak to what happened to the previous development.
No, I'm saying, was it like the school district did not want to sell it, or I mean, is that something that public information that we can get? Because
again, I don't know the reasoning. If the school district wants to share that reason, they can, but I'm not sure if it's really necessary or under our purview tonight, based on what we're reviewing at this time.
Ms. Farakis.
Yeah, somewhere in the packet, I think in your presentation, Mr. Carlisle, there was some talk about common ownership of part of those 12 acres with the Troy School District. But what I just heard is that the 12 acres that would go to the developer would be completely owned by the developer, and only the 68 remaining would remain sole possession of the Troy School District. Is there any common ownership of the 12 acres that we need to be aware of?
No, my understanding is that so there's 12 acres total. 6 acres of the 12 will be developed for those 31 home sites. The other 6 acres would be put forth in some form of either conservation easement and donated, or it'll be part of the homeowner association, but it will remain as open space in perpetuity. The only thing that would happen within those 6 acres, this would be something that we would finalize in the cluster agreement if this moves forward, would be the only thing that could happen in those 6 acres would either be some sort of trail system in and around the pond and the 13 gravel parking lots, space parking lot in Trailhead.
So,
I don't believe there's common ownership between, once the sale is done, the 12 acres are obtained by Robertson Brothers. I don't think there's common ownership between Robertson Brothers and the school district, but again, I'll let them clarify that.
okay, and, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Roush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kyle, I have actually a couple issues I'd like to talk about. One of which is the remaining land that the school district will have. Given as much as this 80 acres appears to be two separate parcels, and the parcel that the 12 acres is being sold from is giving up all of its frontage or access, is it appropriate that, given the standards of review, I believe included some provisions about long-term protection and preservation of the natural resources, that we require, or that there be required, an easement to provide access to the remaining lands to the remaining property owner, the school district? That's my first question.
The school district has access to the remaining property through Evanswood, so really we would not need to put any sort of access easement through this property.
So as a follow-up to that comment, because the site that has access on the side street is not this site, it's a separate parcel, does that make a difference?
Not really. I mean, it's owned by the same ownership. If the assessor's office may require them to combine it, but again, I don't know if that should impact how we view this particular development.
Okay, then my next issue is the bulk regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Section 10.4 E2A requires a perimeter setback, and the perimeter setback for the principal structures from all of the boundaries or borders, of the development shall be equal to the rear yard setback. So in the front yard, I noticed that the properties that parallel Square Lake Road are set back 50 feet from the boundary, the property line. And the properties that are on the east and west boundaries of the site are only, I believe, 25 feet setback from the property line, not the 40 feet provided for in this perimeter setback provision. In addition to that, I noticed that the abutting subdivision on the west, the property there is set back 50 feet from the property line at Square Lake Road. And going to the opposite side, the east, that building, that home is set back about 90 feet. Yes, 90 feet. So given our transition issues in terms of our standard of review and the fact that this perimeter setback appears to be 40 feet, shouldn't those two homes be set back 40 feet?
I'm sorry, I missed which particular house numbers are you talking about?
It would be house numbers 1 and number 22. So it's the ones that have side yards.
From Square Lake Road?
Yes, those have side yards that abut Square Lake Road, and they're not.
I have to double check what the distance of those are. Certainly, the planning, you can make a recommendation to waive that setback if they're less than the required 40 feet. I think Director Salmon and I treated those as a front yard adjacent to it, so we didn't count those as a perimeter setback. It's more of a front yard setback, so we felt that it did comply with the provisions of the cluster ordinance. But if you have a different interpretation, either way, it's really under the purview of the Planning Commission. But we think that 1 and 22 do comply because they do meet the front yard setback adjacent to
the 1 and 22. The front yard is actually on the private street, and the side yard is what is up against Square Lake Road. And given that the provision provides for a minimum of 40-foot setback, I would think that would be appropriate.
I don't want to get into zoning interpretation here, but we interpret corner lots. Essentially, one would be a 1 and 22 are corner lots because they front on two public roads. Those are two front yard setbacks. They're not a side or rear yard setback.
Okay.
So we treat those as front yards.
Okay.
If you don't, but Mr. Ralph, if you don't feel that's appropriate, that's certainly a point of discussion the planning commission could have, that you could ask for more setback for 1 and 22 from Square Lake Road.
Well,
Our biggest concern when we consider clusters is part of the future residents in terms of how their proximity, but we really intend to buffer those existing neighborhoods and houses that are already there, not necessarily the new houses that are being proposed. But I certainly understand your position, and that's the point of discussion the planning commission can certainly have.
Yeah, thanks for informing me about the when they front on two roads that being considered front yards. I didn't realize that. But as it relates to your statement that all of the setbacks comply, I disagree that this does not comply with the perimeter setback in the setback provisions, the bulk regulations. And is that a correct statement?
I disagree with that, but I don't want to get, I mean, it's not really worth getting into semantics. If you think it needs additional, if 1 and 22 need additional setbacks, that, that's something planning commission can discuss.
Well, it's not a question of semantics, Mr. Carlisle. What I'm really trying to understand is the ordinance says that the perimeter setback on all borders shall be what has been determined to be 40 feet. And if that's, and I guess I really need to understand that the ordinance says that, there's something else that overrules that or overrides that?
We have interpreted and implied for cluster ordinances that the front setback on the primary road is not considered part of the perimeter boundary that requires the contiguous 40 feet, in this case, setback. It's a front yard setback.
Okay, so
we've consistently applied that for all new cluster developments as it relates to the primary road, the main road it fronts on.
Okay, so all borders doesn't apply. You're assuming that primary roads.
We don't consider that a border. We don't consider the road a border per se. The main road is not considered. The major model roads we don't consider those a border to the development interpretation.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else for Mr. Carlisle? Ms. Malala Holly.
Mr. Carlisle, in your presentation, you mentioned that the side deviations are less than 15 feet between homes that sit on the north and the south side of the south areas. Is it 15 feet that is reserved for single family homes only, and that it can be less for cluster homes? Is that how I need to understand this?
So the cluster standard states that every home needs to be 15 feet from an adjacent cluster home. They are asking for a deviation to allow some homes to be less than 15 feet. They are asking at a minimum, the largest relief they're asking for is to allow, I believe, 5 houses or 4 houses to be 10 feet apart rather than the 15. So the house separation ranges between 10 feet to 15 feet, depending on where the house is within the development.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, and this may go to Ms. Dufresne as well, but is the Planning Commission able to ask for any evidence of agreements between Robertson Brothers and the school district as far as the relationship between the two properties?
That's not really part of your review, Mr. Lambert. The school district's not selling that back half, and Mr. Robertson Brothers isn't purchasing that back half. So that's not really something that you can put a condition on in terms of if you were to grant approval.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Ms. Parakis. Would you want to comment? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure at what point it was appropriate to bring it up, but and if we're going to talk about those side setbacks, to me, the 15 feet is a bare minimum setback that's been provided. So I would not be in support of deviating from that, allowing any sort of deviation. For me, it's a quality of life issue. It makes a big impact on how the development looks. I already think that 15 feet is quite small, even given the sizes of the homes. And, I don't need to do the math for everyone, but, asking for a 5-foot deviation on 15 feet is significant. It's over 30% of the standard that we're talking about getting rid of. They're not asking for 6 inches. So I would not be in favor of allowing the deviation. Essentially what we're telling them is go ahead and cram as many houses as you can. And I don't see why we would lower our standards to allow that to happen. The standards are there for a reason. I think for, like I said, quality of life for the people who are going to buy those homes. I do think that we should have concern for the future purchasers of the homes and also how it looks. I think, 15 feet is already pretty small. So I would not be in favor of that. And that would be my recommendation to the city council on that.
Anyone else for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savadon? Mr. Savadon, please go ahead.
Just a reminder that we have representatives of Robertson Brothers and the Troy School District in attendance this evening, and I believe they have a brief presentation that they'd like to make.
Sure.
They'll also be available to answer any questions you may have.
Yep, they're next. So at this point, I'd like to hear from the developer and school board. Is that school district or school board rep?
Nick West is here from Troy School District.
School district, good. Okay, we'll start with the developer and then we'll certainly swing over to the school district.
Yes, hello. So I'm Tim Loughran. I'm the Director of Land Acquisition for Robertson Homes, 6905 Telegraph Road in Bloomfield Hills. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you for your time this evening. I'm actually a fellow planning commissioner, so I know for a fact you don't get thanked very much. So I wanted to start out with that. We believe that with this new community, we will have the right plan at the right time, at the right place. The land, as we mentioned, is currently owned by the Troy School District. In Robertson, we have won an RFP in order to develop the front 12 acres of the greater 80-acre parcel. We are proposing to build a nicely appointed ranch home community with significant open space. The homes will be just under 1,900 square feet. They'll have 2-car garage. They'll have 2 bedrooms with a den and 2.5 baths. A finished basement will be an option for a buyer. And I know it's been mentioned they're story and a half. They're actually single story. It's not a story and a half unit. So that's all on one floor. Our belief is that this housing product is in very short supply in the market, and it allows Troy's residents to downsize within their own community. Right now, they don't have many options in Troy, as I'm sure you know. They're going elsewhere. They're going to neighboring communities. We're building some of those. So we know you're losing residents because the product just doesn't exist. It also frees up colonial homes for new families looking to be in Troy with the great school district. So I'm hoping I can share my screen and just do a quick presentation if that's okay with everyone.
Oh yes, please do.
Jackie, I think you might need to give me permission.
Yeah,
You should be.
There you go.
You should be able to now, Tim.
Okay. Does everybody see the slide deck here?
Yes.
Okay. Going slow, so give me a second here. Okay. So again, Meadows of Troy, 12.42 acres, 2.5 dwelling units per acre overall, which is consistent with surrounding areas. It is a R1D, one family residential. 31 homes are proposed. Ben had sort of mentioned the discrepancy. We are providing 40% open space. The minimum is 30%, which would be 32. We're actually providing 40%, which would allow for 35 units. But again, we're only proposing 31 on the property. They all are for sale, detached ranch condominiums, 1,834 square feet. And as Ben had mentioned, be 42% overall open space. It's excluding the pond, 52% if we include the pond. So I'll run through this real quick, but again, it's the product we think is a necessity. We hear this all the time from people looking to buy in Troy. So we believe this is the product that will hit the market that people are looking for. Right now it's a tax exempt user. We'd be providing 30 new taxpayers, significant natural open space preservation, and we will be providing a trailhead and a parking area for public use, which I think is a very important addition to the project, a public benefit. It will be walkable, and there'll be pedestrian trail connections throughout the open space complex. There will be tree-lined streets, and again, I think a very big public benefit is it's a housing option for residents that just are clearly underserved. Self-promotion, Robertson, we've been around for over 75 years. I think you guys know who we are because we've been in front of you. We've built probably about 10 or plus communities in Troy over the years. We built the Chatfield Commons property at northwest corner of Coolidge and Wattles, which is a similar type of project. That was, I think, a very well-received development in Troy. And recently, we've been building a lot of townhomes in your community: Kilmer Place, Bradley Square, and Long Lake Square. And we love being in Troy. So just quickly on the site plan, I'll address some of the concerns that some of the planning commissioners had. And this is, just to point this out, this is actually I guess my cursor isn't working, but this is an updated plan. The one that got into Ben's report was a little bit of an older plan. We actually provided a lot more trees, and we added in the wood chip trail on the north part of this. So, what he had shown you, this is actually an improvement of that. There's quite a bit of buffer, if you can see, along Square Lake Road. In fact, we would propose perhaps moving some of those behind units 1 through 5 and 16 to 22. But I believe, and Ben can confirm, those are required trees along Square Lake. So there'll be quite the buffer from Square Lake. Just generally speaking, again, these are all ranch homes. So, the site plan, I don't think does it justice. I do have a perspective that I want to show you, which is very telling. There was a question about distance between buildings. Frankly, we're a practitioner. We've built probably more condominiums in Southeast Michigan than any other builder in the entire metro area. And we take a lot of pride in that. And our home buyers consistently tell us they're looking for a good product. I don't think we've ever had anyone complain about setbacks or building separation in our condominium projects. So as a practitioner, I want to point that out, that is something that our buyers, that is not a concern for them. The alternative to doing that would be to do duplex units. We could fit probably the same amount of duplex units, and nobody wants to live right next to each other. We've tried to build these in other communities, and we failed. People want to have some separation, and certainly what we're providing is enough, because we've done it in other communities without any issue. And just to point out, when we talk about 10 feet, 11 feet, 15 feet, we're actually doing that to, it's hard to see it on the site plan, you probably can't see it, but the side of each home has in the den, it's got an appendage, I think it's almost 2 feet of an overhang for a bay window. So the separation requirement that we're showing, that's to the bay window. It's not from house to house per se. So I just wanted to point that out. So that's a couple more feet as well. And really, we looked at this and we did not want to destroy any more wetlands. We wanted to provide the trailhead. And that is, one of the reasons why this laid out the way it is. You have a cluster ordinance. Your ordinances, they actually try to bring these types of communities in. They encourage these types of communities. So that the ordinance itself allows for deviation specifically so we can provide these type of projects. So when we look at your cluster ordinance, to us, it's clear this is the type of development you want. I'm hearing that that's not the case, but that is the purpose of a cluster development. We're providing over 50% of open space. So yes, the side setbacks on 1 and 22, I understand the comment. The previous plan actually had those homes in almost the exact same spot. So that was approved previously. We could push unit 5 a little bit farther north. That's getting into wetlands. And frankly, we could do that. We could work with Eagle to do that. we wanted to preserve as much open space as possible. 16, we could move north and take out the gravel trailhead. I think the city wants that from the conversations I've had previously. And I know the school district wants that because that was a provision in the purchase agreement. So by providing the gravel trailhead and preserving as much open space and wetlands as possible, this is what a cluster project looks like. So we're very, I don't want to say sensitive to it, but to us, this is what home buyers want to see. And this is the community they want to live in. So I'm happy to talk about any of those a little bit further. This does show, again, the trailhead on the north part. That would be open to the public. So this is not something we would typically want to see in one of our private cluster home developments. Having the public go through a private street is not something we typically would want to do. But it was something that was very important to the school district. And it's important to them because their plans are to dedicate open space to the north of us. And this would be a way for the public to do that. So I wanted to point that out. And Mr. West could speak to that a little bit more if he'd like, but that is why that's there. And hopefully that'll allay some concerns. They just haven't got to that process of getting the details. There are other, if I can move on to the trail plan, we are proposing trails throughout the 12 acres. Oh, there's my cursor. We'd be providing new trails here. There are existing unimproved trails that exist throughout this whole area. So we would be tying into that with new trail connections, and those go throughout. So I wanted to point that out as well. This truly will be a wonderful place for active adults. Just from a site context perspective, you can see how it fits into the overall community and just how much open space we're actually preserving. I think that is truly a huge benefit of this project. This is an example of the home. So I can see why Ben thought they were a story and a half. They're not. That's a faux window, if you will. But they are all single story. And of course, they can finish out the basement if they want, but they're all single story, 2-bedroom with a den plan. You can see there is separation. These aren't towering 2-story homes that you typically see in Troy. So I think it's very important to point these things out. It's really unique in the quality of the homes and the right sizing of the homes. Of the rooms compared to smaller duplex condominiums. So you do see other duplex units being built in the area. They're just simply too small and not usable. But with this product, especially at the scale it's at, I think it fits in very well. All of the landscaping will be maintained by a homeowners association. So everything you see here as far as landscaping will be maintained by the homeowners association. Will always be kept in this condition, as well as the exteriors. So that's something that's very important for these communities. These are some depictions. These would be the plans we would be proposing. This is a model in a neighboring community. In fact, we're building right now in Rochester Hills, very nearby. So you can actually walk. The model's not quite done yet, but you can walk and see the development. And we've been very successful. People have just they've come in droves to that community because this is the product and the plan that they want. They want to downsize into a very nice new ranch home. So we do know what we're doing. This is something that we're very prideful of. And we think this will be just very well received in the market. So again, this is the site plan. I talked about some of these. There are a couple of discrepancies from the report. I know a couple of references to 14 parking spaces. We actually have 13 parking spaces. We had to remove one for fire, the fire code. And again, the open space percentage, 42%, not 30%. So, as far as the ultimate use of the remaining 68 acres, again, that gravel trailhead is, the only purpose it is there is to serve the northern section. So, I don't know if Mr. West wants to weigh in on that at this point, or if you all want to ask me questions, but I'm happy to answer them.
Well, at this point, any commissioners have a comment for the developer? Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a couple of compliments. Number one, that you're trying to meet a need that we absolutely have in this community for these types of homes. And secondly, appreciate you naming one of the streets for Edmonds, recognizing our former Planning Commission chair and also the former school district member.
Yes.
But the question is, what would the market price be for these homes when they first come on the market?
Yeah, if it's any indication with our the neighboring property, it would be in the mid to high 400s as a base, which does sound like a lot of money, but typically they're downsizing from a large colonial. They've paid off their mortgage, and this is something that they just kind of roll into. I'll be honest, they're putting more money into these than I would have thought. I think any of us would have thought. So they're really customizing this, which they can. We have a design gallery in our Bloomfield Hill office, but generally they'll be in the mid to high 400s starting out. That answers the question.
Thank you.
Anyone else? For Mr. Faison.
Piggybacking on Mr. Lambert's comment, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. Piggybacking on Mr. Lambert's comment, I was pleased to see the housing type, but also curious because we've heard from others that although we may perceive a demand for these smaller ranches with first floor master bedrooms, that they're not very popular. So you mentioned the project in Rochester Hills. I was curious, do you have other similar projects like this with these size homes in either the Troy area or Southeast Michigan?
Sure. Yeah, we have a project in Northville. It's at 6 Mile and Ridge, which we actually started out with duplex units. And that project was our worst project for probably a good year. We went to this detached version, and it has been, we're probably selling, two a month, which is very good for this, this type of buyer. So I would definitely say that we have no concern whatsoever that this will be a successful product. There's not a concern at all. We are building larger units as well in other places. Those obviously get a little expensive. This size, the rooms are right sized, and they really don't need more than 2 bedrooms and a den. So it really is the perfect size. And I would encourage, we actually have a model of this in our Northville project if you get a chance to get all the way down there, but that is available as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I do want to compliment you. I think these are beautiful homes. I'm really impressed with them, and I certainly believe that they fill a need that we've been looking for. I was really on board until I just heard the price. That would be the only concern, because I did think that what the empty nesters were saying is that they wanted to get out of their homes, partly because they are so expensive. I know that they've gone up in value, but I was thinking that we were going to build 1,800 square foot homes somewhere more around the $300,000 range. So, I'm just putting it out there. That's a bit of a concern. But back to my initial concern about those sideways setbacks. I know you mentioned that people haven't complained about that before, but when you're showing condominiums, you go there and you're going to complain about maybe the hardwood floors or the paint on the walls. You're not going to say, "Oh, I wish we could move the house over." I'm just saying that I think that, let me rephrase it. Have you ever considered pulling out a couple of the houses and just spreading them out? So when you look at the site concept plan, I'm not sure if this is it in front of us, but if you pulled out number 1 and then just spaced out 1 through 5 and pulled out number 22 and spaced out 16 through 21 and do that on all the rows, you could have an ample sideways setback, and yeah, you'd lose 4 units if you did it on all 4 rows. But I think that it would then meet the ordinance, and it would also make for a little bit nicer of a development as well.
I think those are really legitimate concerns. I hear what you're saying completely. We feel like the best use of private space, and again, these are condominiums, so it's not technically private space, but the best use of private space for these home buyers is towards the rear of the units. So that's where we concentrate our if you will, our space to provide it to the residents. So I think that's number one. It's really not, the side yard doesn't mean anything. They're not going to use it if it's 20 feet, you know what I mean, compared to 10 feet. So that is how we look at it. You had mentioned cost, and I think that's a very relevant topic, because obviously costs have gotten completely out of control for materials, for labor. We're really struggling with it. Yes, the market has raised, but our margins have gone down because costs have gone up so much for materials, and it's very frustrating. But a real big component of cost, and it's something that people don't understand typically unless you're in the business, but a big component of cost is land development. So, the previous project had fewer homes. It's less homes to spread the costs over for the same amount of land development. So we try to bring these down as much as we possibly can in price. And to do that, you really have to bring your cost per unit down. So, that's a component of price, because you had mentioned that. I think that's very important. I think we'll be able to be less than we are in Rochester Hills potentially. But the way that pricing is today, there's no way we can sell homes in the 300s with this type of product. It's just really not possible, which is, it's frustrating to me, because we were doing that probably 3 years ago. And if I can make one more comment, because I know you had mentioned this, and another commissioner had as well. When we looked at the side setbacks for 1 and 22, we look at really what the setback is for Square Lake Road. If you can see, there's quite a bit of distance there. It's not like, Square Lake Road is right up on the sidewalk. So there is quite a bit of open space or landscaping to the property before it even begins. So, that's another consideration that I'd want to throw out there. It's that, and it's preserving, obviously, as I mentioned before, as much open space and wetland as we can.
Go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you, Chairman Krent. Thank you for this presentation, Mr. Tim. And I will agree with every other planning commissioner who's thinking that ranch homes are in the need here in the city of Troy. 2 questions for you. One, of course, is a follow-up comment. I still strongly feel, and the reason I asked is that 15 feet that is reserved as side deviation is also the same for cluster homes. Then that means that is something that I would like to also see on there. It is something that I feel the homeowners should feel that they have their private space, their yard, their side areas, kind of trying to keep it, even though they are in a cluster development, they are trying to keep this also feel like at least a single family home, even though it is a detached condo site. The second thing is, I know you mentioned in your presentation that Troy School District wanted you to have some kind of a trail set up and a parking lot access to that. I do agree with you that if this is as it is wanted or desired by Troy School District to have a parking lot and an access point for the trailhead, it is still a private road. So my question is there any other way that an opening can be provided for public access to the parking lot and then to the trailheads instead of taking the road that sits right in front of homes 16 through 22? I don't know. I just want to throw it there only because I don't see this becoming a very publicly usable trail, although it looks nice to have that in the backyard of some homes and generally speaking in that area, nicely wooded area. But I don't know. I just wanted to find out if there is any other option to provide an opening for the parking space and to enjoy the trails that sit in the wetlands area.
Great question. As I mentioned, it's not something that is ideal for our project. We would be making a public access there. And I think people will just naturally know it's there and figure it out. So, from another location, I think they'd have to go through a private neighborhood, kind of a rural neighborhood to the north, or possibly from the project to the development to the west. So, I think the school district was looking at this as an opportunity to get this in sooner rather than later by kind of piggybacking on this project. Your other question, again, with the side setbacks, you know, I guess if we were being held, if we're supposed to be held to the regular the standards, it really, there's no purpose of coming in for a cluster development. So, you know, we position our homes so the side setbacks, nobody's got windows to windows. We're very conscious about that. That you know, bay window has a window, but then the other side, we're very conscious about not having another window to it. So we plan that out. And again, they're just not going to use that side yard. There's no reason for them to do anything in their side yard, even if it was another, as I mentioned, 10 or 15 feet. You know, what are they going to do with that? The simple fact of removing units, and I don't want to sound like a typical developer, but we would have to raise the price of the units. And, you know, we're probably talking in the 500s. And that's an area we're not necessarily comfortable with, you know, starting out on a base house cost. We feel like this neighborhood being in the mid to high fours really is where we need to be. So the result of losing units typically increases the cost of the homes.
Thank you. You mentioned one of your development projects is Bradley Square. I live pretty close to the Bradley Square condo.
Okay.
That's a beautiful, beautiful condo complex. I have to compliment you on the development. Now, just from my understanding, can you tell me what the side setbacks are in those between the two condo buildings?
I would imagine they're 15 feet building separation. That's what we typically do with our you know, 3-story townhomes or 2.5-story townhomes. So I'm guessing is 15 feet. Sometimes we go a little bit more. Yeah, they're 15 feet. Again, those are, and I think that's, you know, that maybe leads into my perspective drawing here. You know, these are not 3-story or 2-story or even 1.5. You know, they kind of look like it, but these are single story. So there's not a tunnel effect. You know, with Bradley Square, certainly it's more of an urban type of product. So you see it. Here, I'm telling you, and I'd encourage all of you, since we have 2 weeks, if you get a chance to go down to Northville or even Rochester, which we're, you know, we don't have anything finished yet, but you can certainly see what I'm talking about there. This is, you know, the buyers, frankly, the buyers like being near each other. This is the type of environment they want to be in. So further apart is suburban single family to them. They want to be in a condominium. And again, we do not want to attach them. We do not want to build duplexes. This is, you know, what you get when you separate them.
And one last question for you. You mentioned that you're going to have trails around the pond area there.
Yes.
Considering the fact that this particular development doesn't have any parks nearby, I was just curious I know it is ranch homes, but even if there were families that move in with little kids, is there a provision for them to have some kind of play structure, play area, or is it's just going to be walking trails for people to enjoy?
Yeah, this particular buyer, and so we don't, what's the word? Our deed restrictions don't not allow families, but I'll tell you, I can't even think of any families that have lived in these communities. So I don't, that's certainly not our target. I've made the comment in the past that maybe we should have something for grandchildren, but you know, that's something that just has never gained any traction. When we actually send out to our home buyers, we ask them, we do a poll for what amenities they like to see in their communities. Nothing like that has ever come up. It's typically trails. It's typically, you know, open space and landscaping, which, you know, is obviously exactly what we're providing here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Tagle.
Thank you, Mr. Krant. I do want to compliment you and Mr. Clark, who's been very quiet there.
Yes, he has.
Hi, Jim. Very nice development. And I don't share a concern about the side yard separation. I think you're correct in saying that side yards really aren't the focus of these developments. It's the front yard or the backyard. And side yards may be a point of transition going from front to back, but I don't see that as a problem. And you've also hit upon the point that there are no, it's not windows looking into windows. You've got a solid one side and a bay window on the other. So I think the side yard is okay. The deviation is okay, just professionally speaking. I do have a question about the detention ponds. How are they fed? Is this purely a runoff from your development? Are there any other feeders going into this pond? Will it stay wet year round?
I don't believe it'll stay wet year round, and it is specifically for our development. So, and the full 12 acres. So it would be a true detention pond where it'd be released at an agricultural rate. But my understanding is it would not be a wet pond throughout.
I'm sorry, did you say that the rest of the acreage drains to is this a low spot?
12 acres. No, what I meant was it includes the area of just the 12 acres we're purchasing.
All right. Okay.
If I'm wrong, my engineer will text me, but I believe it is a dry pond.
Yes.
Mr. Savinot, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Valid concerns raised by at least 3 planning commission members related to setbacks. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. If this is a traditional subdivision or site condominium and there was relief sought for a setback, the applicant would have to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance. It's different for a cluster because it's, as Mr. Loughran indicated, it's somewhat the nature of the beast to provide flexibility in the provisions. No 2 clusters are alike, no 2 properties are alike. So we really review these applications on a case-by-case basis. One of the reasons that we decided to go in this direction was that for clusters, there's 2 public hearings. There's a planning commission public hearing, which is there's notice provided in the newspaper and mailings to everyone within 300 feet. And then the same happens for city council. So there's really 2 opportunities to vet the proposed reduction. Planning commission has input on the recommendation, and then ultimately it goes to city council. So it's a little bit different. The concept of a cluster is basically preserving open space throughout the site by grouping together closely or clustering homes, and the flexibility is kind of built into the provision. So just a reminder, the planning commission is a recommending body, and if the majority of the planning commissioner feel that it's not appropriate to cluster the homes as proposed, then that would be in your recommendation to city council. Same goes for the setback of units 1 and 2. If a majority of the planning commission feel like it's inappropriate and too close, then that will be part of your recommendation to city council.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And to the developer, I echo my fellow planning commissioners' positive comments about the proposed development, and I can understand how, to a certain degree, how the costs can get up with the sale prices can get up very high with the high-end finishes that appear that you're putting into these homes. I do have one question that came up as a result of the question regarding the detention ponds, and that is, what are you doing with the surface drainage easement that's 20 foot wide that ends up running along the western boundary of the site?
Good question. That stays. That feeds the development to the north and west. So we developed around it. Our engineer has, I think he actually did that original plan. So that is in our grading and draining plan, and our drainage is in addition to that. So that remains, if that's your question.
Yeah. So do I understand it correctly? The direction of the flow, is it to the south or to the north?
My understanding is that's from the north to the south for that pipe.
Okay. Oh, so there's a pipe in there that takes away that? Because I
Yes.
thought I read it was surface drainage.
I'm sorry. And again, John's going to probably text me right now. I believe it is surface drainage from the north to the south, and we would be keeping that in the open ditch configuration.
Okay. So then at the rear of the homes on numbers 1 through 5, then you would have surface drainage going through that rear yard common area that leads out to Square Lake Road.
Yeah, and I should be better All right, he says this, low point is at 5, then flow to the east, whatever that means. So,
So does that mean if the low point is a 5 and it flows to the east, then maybe that does tie into your detention ponds?
unit 5. It does not tie into our detention pond. It's just for our development. Is that the question?
Yeah, so I guess I still don't understand, but potentially what you're telling me is that if it's draining from the north to the south,
Correct.
it would be potentially draining on the surface behind homes 1 through 5 to Square Lake Road.
We would be capturing everything from 1 through 5.
Okay, so unfortunately that makes it more complicated for me. So if the surface drainage easement is from the north, from the remaining 60 acres, is going to 1 through 5, going as far as 1 through 5, the drainage must continue past to Square Lake Road, but you're going to capture your own drainage. Is that what you're
drainage? John, did you want to speak up on that? You're more eloquent than I would be.
Good evening, everyone. John Thompson with PEA. The flow of the water along the west property line, it is high at Unit 1, low at Unit 5. So that is flowing from south to north. Behind Mayapple, that's flowing from north to south. So there's a low point along the property line at Unit 5. And then the water flows from that point through the wetlands that are behind lots 6 through 12 and in between the detention area. It's going to flow underneath the driveway by the gravel trailhead and then continue to the east to offsite.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, John.
Mr. Sabaton, go ahead.
Just for the purpose of clarification for Kathy Zarnecki for the minutes, that was John Thompson's, the project engineer he was from PEA.
Anyone else for the developer? Well, I'll say that yes, I've been looking forward to a development like this for a long time. We've had a lot of requests, just anecdotally through the people I've contacted around Troy, being my age in the 70s. And it's nice to see a high quality level that you're presenting. I've always thought that, you could take a small footprint, but really put in the elements, the surface materials that really bring that level up as far as it's not a small home, but a smaller home. And I appreciate the work you've done on that to bring that kind of quality level into these smaller yet much in need homes in our city. I'm a little leery about the less than 15 feet between the buildings, but I can agree with Mr. Tagle that the home buyer for these is not going to be that concerned about that. Well, first of all, because of the location of your windows. I think that was well done. Understand what you're accomplishing here. And the setback from Square Lake Road on units number 1 and 22 don't bother me. Mainly you've got screening there, plus you've got an easement between the actual road surface and that sidewalk. So there's enough of a space there that home number 1 and number 22, I mean, they're going to hear road noise no matter what. That's 45 miles an hour with tires, even electric cars, they're going to make there's going to be noisier homes. But that said, I know you've got the landscaping in there all along Square Lake Road to help mitigate that noise level. I really can't find any fault other than the setbacks between the homes. I wish they were a little bit more than what you're offering. But again, what Mr. Tagle said probably rings true with the buyer. It's really not a big consequence to those buyers. So Unless there's any further discussion on this, Mr. Savadat's got his hand up.
Just a reminder that we were to open the public hearing, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes. Before I open the public hearing, though, I want to go to the school district representative, and who would that be?
Good evening, Chairman Krant. I'm Rick West. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services for the school district. And I know that we have, there's been several questions regarding the intent on the 68 acres on the north side of that property. It is the board's intent, our Board of Education's intent, through resolution to preserve that property in perpetuity. We are currently in discussions with Six Rivers Land Conservancy to do so. We are looking at several options, including Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund grant in order to do that, and partner with another entity in order to do that. So we are seeking opportunities for the preservation of that property, but I do want to just inform this commission that it is the intent of the board to maintain or to preserve that in perpetuity. Natural trails is what the expectation is with Six Rivers Land Conservancy. There's great ecological value in the property. There's been a lot of studies over the last 2 decades, and I've been intimately involved with this property over the 6 years that I've been at the district. So we look forward to moving this property forward, hopefully, and preserving the balance of the land.
And with that, I just want to add a question. You know, the Evanswood, your property extends over to Evanswood, other parcel. Are you going to have any access from Evanswood to trails, or how does that, you know, have you any thought about that with the district or the school board as far as maybe another public access point like the developers proposing here?
Sure, we haven't taken that off the table, but our board was interested in leveraging this purchase agreement to ensure that we have appropriate access to the site. So we'll continue to explore that option, but right now we didn't want to, I guess for lack of a better term, upset the Evanswood subdivision by creating public access in that when it's perhaps not needed.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the Troy School District from our group? Oh, I see a hand up. I don't have a name underneath right now in this view, so.
Yes, it's Mariana Parakis.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Is it Mr. Clark, I believe?
Yes, it's Jim Clark from Robertson. I think Tim did a wonderful job. I guess, you know, the only thing I'd like to add is, you know, we too are concerned about side yard setbacks. And if we didn't have a hard parking lot to the north, we would extend those side yard setbacks. And if we didn't have a wetland to the north of all the other homes, we'd extend those side yards also. But to deliver these homes, ranch style homes, which are very expensive to build, you just can't give up the density and bring them in to meet the needs of your residents who want to sell their houses and move parallel or you know, maybe put a little bit more money in for the last house before the home. So it's, you know, it's a compromise that's dictated by the cluster ordinance because of the unique characteristics of this site, which are there's a lot of wetlands and there's that parking lot that is, Rick pointed out, is very important to the school district. It's not important to us, but it's important that we have it in there to fulfill our obligations. And so we have, you know, respectfully asked for a little variance in where necessary to bring these homes together. We know our buyers are going to, if they are bothered by the side yard setback, they will not buy. But we are not the least bit worried after 75 years of doing this that we will be able to find 30 homeowners who want to stay in their Troy community. So thank you.
Now, Ms. Parakis, you had a...
Yes, I had a question for Mr. West from the Troy School District. Can you just confirm that the 12 acres are going to be sold outright and there's no co-ownership of any part of that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Robertson Brothers will have ownership of that 12 acres.
Ms. Malala Holly.
So I read in the packet that we received about providing maintenance agreement for the parking lot. I guess I'm not fully understood about who is to maintain the parking lot that is now being provided.
So as Mr. West mentioned, that this would be sold to Robertson, and then we would be conveying the entire area over to the homeowners association for maintenance of all the open space areas. So that would fall under the homeowners association.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Roush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, quick question with reference to the parking lot. So if that's going to be maintained by the homeowners association, is there going to be an easement that provides for the public access to the trailhead?
Yes.
So that this doesn't disappear down the road.
Correct. Yeah, one of the requirements that Ben had in his report was that Turtle Woods Drive would have a public access easement as part of it.
As well as the parking area.
Yes. Yeah. It's intended for public access. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rahman, you have your.
Just one quick question to Mr. West. Yeah, I understand you kind of clarified my initial question, like what happened to the Montreal deal, because I know that in that proposal there was a plan for the rest of the property. So you confirmed that the rest of the property will be we're not going to build another something there, right? You confirmed that on the road.
The board's intent is to preserve the balance of that property in perpetuity.
In perpetuity, okay. And then when we gonna know, or is there something that deal will be done when this property is sold, or do you know the future, like when we can understand that there is something on the paper?
I do not have a timeline for that.
But it is confirmed that there will be no more construction in this rest of this property, right?
Currently, I can state that is the board's intent through their resolution. They have directed that we work toward the preservation of it in perpetuity. And we are doing that. We are working diligently to do that. Our hope is to get that done within the next 24 months, really. But I would be disingenuous if I could guaranteeing that to this commission. But that is the board's will at this point. Just as the city council, we are, we answer to a board of education that also can change over the course of an election as well. So right now, that is the direction of our board.
Thank you so much for your feedback.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, my understanding, the previous developer was purchasing the entire 80 acres. They were gaining quite a bit of wetland credits for other projects. We simply didn't need wetland credits. So that's part of the reason why this is a little bit of a different programming.
Very good. Appreciate the input.
Completely. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. West.
That was a completely, and I don't know if we need to get in the nuances of that, but that was a completely separate agreement in which we were working with the Eagle, the Michigan Department of I forget what they call themselves now, but it was the old MDEQ, in which they were going to, as Mr. Loughran alluded to, they were going to get the credits, the wetland credits to use not only for this development, but also for their development on what we call Section 16. And ultimately that fell apart as a result of their failure to receive governmental approvals within the timeline of the agreement. And there's a lot of detail surrounding that, but it was completely separate. So then we took it back out at our board's direction for an RFP, and we sit here today with the awarded bidder.
Thanks for the information. Before I open the meeting for a public hearing, is there any other comments or questions for both the developer, the school district, or anyone else from staff? Seeing none, I want to open the public hearing at this point. And we do have comments, both written and I believe through via the phone messages, I take it. Is that correct, Mr. Salvador?
Yeah, Jackie can confirm how many phone messages there are, and she can play them. I just want to state for the record, we received a number of emails that were provided to the Planning Commission. We got one from Doreen, no last name provided. Ellen B, no last name provided. Camille Bedford, we received 2 emails from Camille Bedford. And we received an email from Koshi George. And finally, one from Dawn and Linda Gottschalk.
Thank you for that. So, Mrs. Ferenz, do you have the voicemails ready for us to listen to?
Hi there. So we do not have voicemails for this case.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, at this point, we can't close. We don't close the public hearing at this point. So, and at this point, what do we need? A resolution to continue this to our next meeting, or?
A resolution to table.
Pardon? Say again, please.
A resolution to table, Mr. Print.
Okay, thank you. So, hearing that from our attorney, do we have someone from our commission to table this item until our next meeting? Looking for a hand up. Oh, Miss Malala Holly. Oh, and then seconded by Mr. Lambert to table. And now I need a roll call, please, Miss Sarnicki.
Ms. Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krent,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is a public hearing, special use and preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2021-0014, proposed St. Mark's Coptic Church Gymnasium and Classroom Addition, west side of Livernois, south of Waddles, parcel 88-20-21-277-036, section 21, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district. Mr. Carlisle is going to take this one, I take it?
Yes, thank you. IT, Bob, I assume it's Bob. Can you make me a presenter? Great, thank you. So for the second public hearing tonight is a proposed addition to the St. Mark's Church. Little background on St. Mark's. It's located on the west side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver. The proposed addition is highlighted on the top aerial view in yellow. That's a kind of a zoomed out view. The one just to the bottom of it is a more zoomed in view of it, and the outline in yellow is a basic outline of the proposed addition. So it's this addition to the existing church at the back of the site. The site is zoned R1B, and the proposed addition would require an amendment to the existing special use for a place of worship. The site plan in front of you, the existing church is outlined in green. The proposed addition is outlined in red. The table to the right indicates the bulk requirements associated with the R1B. We do note that with the addition, currently the site complies with all those requirements, and with addition, it does comply with all the R1B zoning requirements. I should note this is a two-story addition. The first floor includes 7 classrooms. They're located in this location of the floor plan, a kitchen, and the majority of the addition is going to be for a basketball court and stands. The second story portion of the addition includes 5 classrooms, an office, and a multi-purpose room. And you can note below is the basketball courts. The basketball facility, just due to the height of the necessary for the basketball, is actually basically a 2-story portion of the addition itself. This is a kind of a conceptual exterior rendering of the proposed addition. We have had discussions with the applicant with regards to the operations of the addition with regards to mass. Parking for places of worship is done so based on the size of the sanctuary. One of the concerns we have is if both of the additional area or specifically the basketball court for tournaments that they said they're going to hold will be used concurrently with the mass, then hence creating a parking issue at the site. So as part of the discussion with the planning commission, we asked the applicant to provide a detailed use of the space, particularly evenings, to confirm that there's no parking issue as well as no negative impact upon adjacent properties, specifically to the north and south. And of particular concerns with this use outside of parking would be potential lighting and noise impacts. The applicant did not submit a landscape plan. However, shown in their renderings, there are additional landscaping that's shown in the rendering. So we are asking that a landscape plan be submitted with future plan submittals. One of the issues that we spent a lot of time looking at and discussing with the applicant was the issue of buffering and screening. This is a view looking at the site from the west to the east. So Big Beaver would be at the top of the screen. The proposed addition is being located in that larger grassy area that's open there. You'll note that particularly along the southern property line, there's a pretty significant large landscape buffer, existing screening buffer. There is a screening buffer to the north side. It's a little bit less than what is shown on the south. This is this is a view of the buffering that looks from the north to south into the site. And this is a view. This is existing screening provision. So there's no additional landscaping being proposed at this location. This is a view of the site looking from south to the north. Again, this is existing landscaping buffering. There is no additional landscaping being proposed. It's shown in this picture. With regards to lighting, obviously lighting was a concern, something that we did look at. They are providing additional parking lot lighting. We do note that the fixtures and the height of the poles are consistent with the ordinance requirement. We do also know that it appears the applicant has designed the building so that the highest windows are approximately 20 feet above the grade. And we want to ensure that any light emitting from those will be screened by adjacent mature landscaping. So we'd like the applicant to confirm that point. It comes across kind of blurry, but this is the proposed elevation. This is looking from the south to the north of the building. You'll note this red dashed line is the line of demarcation between the existing building, which will be to the right on the screen, and the proposed addition to the left. So in terms of length, the new addition is almost as long as the existing building itself. The applicant has provided a series of renderings. Rendering A at the top is looking from the west to the east. Big Beaver is again at the top of the screen. The elevation, the rendering on the bottom of that is looking at street level, looking from the drive aisle back to the site, I guess it would be to the western end of the site. This is the elevation. The rendering at the top is a rendering at the back of the site, the back of the building itself, and the one on the bottom is the building at night and how it would be lit. There are specific standards the Planning Commission considers with regards to special use. We do find that they have met those provisions, provided the applicant can address those items that we noted, particularly those with regards to impact on adjacent properties with regards to lighting and noise and screening. If the applicant can meet those requirements, we do think they've met the special use standards. This includes that the primary use of the building will remain as a place of worship. There's an existing dense screen to the north and south that should be able to screen the proposed addition. With limitations on co-occupancy of the main sanctuary in the new facility, the additional accessory use shall not impact traffic to the site outside of normal operations of the site as a place of worship. The addition of the accessory building will not impact public services, and the accessory building does not impact the overall environment since the existing area is just a grassy area. So in summary, provide the applicant can explain the satisfaction of the Planning Commission, the use of the building, particularly on the evenings, will not impact residential properties. We are recommending approval of the following conditions. One, that the applicant agrees that there's no concurrent use of the site that should require parking to exceed the existing 322 spaces, such that events or uses that draws users facilities will not be held concurrently with the use of the church activities of Mass. And lastly, the applicant provided a detailed landscape review as part of the final site plan. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop sharing my screen and be open for any questions. Mr. Chairman, I believe you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. I just wanted to say that I'm sure you were referring to Livernois Road and not Big Beaver when you were giving your presentation.
I apologize. I've always referred that I'm dyslexic when it regards to east-west and apparently with regards to roads as well.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
I just had a quick question for Mr. Carlisle at the very end. You just said it in your last slide, something about that we're going to ask them to agree to not hold simultaneously basketball tournaments during worship and all that. What exactly does that mean? I mean, is there some sort of a binding contract, or we're just asking them for their word, or how, what's the significance of that?
Well, I'll leave that up to Ms. Dufresne in terms of how we legally can bind it. My assumption would be that if this was a condition of approval of the Planning Commission, we would put it in some sort of binding agreement that the applicant would agree to and sign it, and we could have that on file with the city. But again, I'll leave it to Ms. Dufresne to speak to how legally we would do that.
I mean, the easiest way to do that would be to make it a condition, like you said, make it a condition of approval in the actual resolution that's eventually passed. I don't know if that satisfies you, Ms. Parakis, but that's probably the easiest way to do that.
Okay, anyone else for Mr. Carlisle's presentation? Okay, seeing none, next item would be having the representatives from St. Mark's to talk about their development. Who would like to go forth on that one from the owner, from the church?
Certainly, I'm available to, or Harold.
Yeah, could you add to what was said by Mr. Carlisle as far as your intentions for this addition and how it's going to interact and work with the neighboring residents?
Yeah, absolutely, Chairman. Thank you for your time, all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. So let me give you a little bit of background first, and I will address these points specifically. I am Mark Nasser. I am one of the board members of St. Mark's Church. I am a lifelong parishioner of this church, and I know you guys are all eager to know the church is not named after me. I am named after the namesake of that church. No, St. Mark's is near and dear to my heart. So let me tell you about the project. This project started 15 years ago, really, when that, what I call a gem of the city of Troy, that larger building on our campus was actually established by our then Pope Shenouda from Alexandria. And we came and we had this vision, and because the parishioners couldn't afford it at the time, it was always part of the master plan to have additional classrooms and a multi-use space, as well as an open area that will be the gym, but also will be the ability to hold conferences and other things of that nature. So about a year and a half ago, right before COVID hit, we had the great blessing of having a strategic planner come in, and he's out of Atlanta, and he works specifically with Orthodox churches, and he came to us through a mutual acquaintance and just helped us put this vision together for what we want to see for this campus, what we want to see for the community in general, and how we can assimilate more into this city. We've been here in Troy for 50 plus years, and yet I will be the first to admit, I think we remain in our relative infancy when it really is about how much we are involved in our community. So the objective is clear. The objective is we need more space. You've got a growing population both within the church and within the community in Troy. We have more and more active parishioners. We again are the minority Christian sect from Egypt, but we've seen more and more people convert to the faith, and we love that, and we love to see people come to our church. And so the idea that the strategic planner put into our minds was, okay, well, if we can become a voting precinct one day, or if we could do blood drives, or if we could do different things in this big gym open area, and we could bring people in and they could see the church and they could ask us questions, well, that would just be a blessing, and we would love to see that. Now, I understand the concern, and I'll tell you very pointedly, we have always had a rule, and I've grown up in this church since the day I was born, that no service can be going on where there is a use of any other facility. That's out of respect to the services of the church. We don't hold mass and hold any other function at the same time. It just doesn't happen. I'm happy to do anything that Julie or anyone else wants to see in writing to make that abundantly clear, but we wouldn't be holding anything in a gym or anywhere else on the campus while there is mass going on. I think the primary concern, if I remember our discussions with Brent and with Ben, was about parking. That honestly would be a secondary concern to us. The primary concern is we don't want to see anything going on and anywhere else while there is worship going on inside of the sanctuary. Other things to know that we believe that it's important to also restrict access. So as part of the strategic plan, again, we reformed everything on our campus to card access only, and it is by appointment, and through the iPhone or through whatever access you have, you've got to have approval from somebody who will grant you access and let you out. So there wouldn't be noise in the evening. There would be no kids loitering. There would be no access to the facility to begin with, because again, we want to protect all those, both on our campus and our surrounding neighbors. And so I'm happy to answer any further questions. I know the other item is a landscape plan, and we will certainly provide that in due course with any future submissions.
Okay, any comments or questions for Mr. Nassar? Go ahead, Ms. Varakis.
Hey, Mark, it's good to see you. I did have a question. I actually drove over there today because I've never actually been on the campus, as you're calling it, and I was shocked at how large the campus is. And in fact, I can't believe that I had never even noticed that there was a second building back there. I had always thought that the church was that building right on Livernois. So could you explain what that is? Is that building used for anything?
Yeah, it's still an active house of worship right now. We have used the front house, or the front church, the front building, which is named for St. Mark, for smaller services, weekday services, liturgies that'll go on, or masses that'll go on earlier, or with elderly people. We pray an Arabic and Coptic liturgy there every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. And then second and third generation parishioners will typically go to the larger building because there's far more of us. And we'll hold our services there starting at 9 o'clock or 8:30 or 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. And also, could you confirm, because when I went back there and drove all the way to the back, and then I went home and looked at the drawings, just can you confirm that no parking spots are being taken up? This is all being put on that grassy area in the back?
That is correct. And I know Harold will present it as well, but I can answer that by saying not only will no parking spots be taken away, some will be added for direct access into like the kitchen area and stuff right there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So you will go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you, Chairman Krent. So for my understanding, what Ms. Parakis did, I did through Google Earth. I walked myself in Google Earth to the location, although I live very close by, but I was curious about what sits behind St. Mark's Church. So you're saying that there is and I did notice that it has a different name too, if I'm correct. and it is an active church. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you still use that. Just so I can understand this better, was there a survey done of your parishioners of the need for a basketball court? If so, and then how was this determined? Basically, because just out of curiosity, it is true that Troy Community Center is very, very close by. I just want to understand that this need was something that was expressed, or how it was expressed, a survey, or whether this came up recently or over a period of time. Just some understanding on that.
Yeah, certainly. So all great points, and I'll tell you that we did a number of surveys starting in 2016. We surveyed the congregation, the parishioners. The number one thing was we had a baby boom in the Coptic Church, for lack of a better phrase. We had so many people, self-included, who had 1, 2, 3, 4 children, and there was no more classroom space in the existing building. And so that was the number one thing that everyone said. We need more classroom space. And in fact, I'm sure Brent remembers that, gosh, this is like 7 or 8 years ago. We even thought about putting those portable classrooms out there because there was no more room for what would be, we call it Sunday school, like catechism. There was no more room. So that was the number one function. And then people started to say, well, you know, the other thing is after we finish our worship and we've got 800 people who go into the worship a lot of Sundays, there's nowhere for them to go and socialize or to see each other, to gather. And so that basketball court, so to speak, yeah, it functions as a basketball court, but it can also be for large meetings. It can be for just a coffee gathering. On some occasions, it can be for other social events. And that's really the function of it. Rather than just say it's just a hall, we said, okay, well, if we've got the ability to use it both as a gym and as a hall or as something else, it's just a large gathering space. And that was the number 2 thing. So what we do here is we try to take the top 2 items that everyone has said that they really want to see and put it into this presentation here.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned blood drive. Well, that is something that definitely, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, and English as a second language, obviously, for the community there is something that was also at the top of the list. And we hope to be able to house that sort of classroom need within this new building.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Savidant, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I should have introduced the team that's representing St. Mark's this evening. We've got Mark Nasser, who's made a brief presentation. We have Father Maximus Habib. How are you doing, Father Maximus? And we have Harold Remlinger from Design Team Plus, who is the project architect for this application.
Thank you for that. So any questions for anyone that represents St. Mark's at this point on our commission? Ms. Parakis, go ahead.
Yeah, I also had a question. Is it my understanding that you guys also run a daycare out of the facility?
There is a daycare existing there right now, yes.
So is the idea with the expansion of the classrooms that you could also expand the daycare? No. Is it open to the public or only to your parishioners?
Open to the public. We've got many members of the community who have their children in that daycare right now.
But none of the new space would be utilized by the daycare, or would it be? Like the kids could play in the gym or whatever?
Certainly they can play in the gym, absolutely. The amenities and resources, absolutely. But the idea is we're in the Troy School District. We've got great schools. We have up to pre-kindergarten, but the decision was made a long time ago that we love the Troy School District. Send your kids to the Troy School District once they become school age.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else with a comment?
And I know Harold does have a presentation, so I don't know if now's the time.
Well, then we'll go right to Harold. What's your last name, Harold?
Last name is Remlinger, Remlinger.
Okay, thank
and
you.
then if I could be allowed to share my screen, please. I don't know who's taking care of that.
Probably be IT.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Can I share my screen, please?
I couldn't see who was talking.
Harold.
Harold. Remlinger?
Correct.
Okay, 1 second, please.
All right. Thank you. As I'm with Design Team Plus, we're out of Birmingham-based architecture interior design firm. We've been working with St. Mark's Church now since about 2014, when we started with their interior design of the large sanctuary, which is at the back of the property where the addition is going on to. We also worked at the time 7 years ago when we looked at doing the expansion of the classrooms. And then also we worked on the expansion of the parking lot, which took place 3 to 4 years ago on the property, expanding in what was a gravel overflow to allow them to make sure that we had plenty of parking on site. So to begin the presentation, for those who have not been to the site, this is St. Mary's St. Philip. St. Mark's is actually the small sanctuary up against Livernois. The facade of the church is with red brick towards the bottom, more rust color, beige brick, limestone accents at the top, and then the dark metals of patina copper with some stainless steel accents. These materials are going to carry over into the addition so that it becomes seamless and it becomes as it was always intended to be, built as one unit and not stand out like putting a pre-engineered building onto it for gym. As Ben had pointed out, the blue area that I show here is the existing sanctuary. The yellow area is the proposed addition. The daycare is the small wing, which is right here. That is going to be used as a daycare. It will not be overflowing into any of the classrooms. In regards to the parking, the classrooms are for Sunday school. These children will be coming with their parents for service in the sanctuary. So it's not as if they're going to be having other people bringing children there that aren't going to be holding or attending the mass or attending the service at the same time, so that they will be working congruently. First floor area of the addition with the gym is approximately about 18,000 square feet. Second floor, as mentioned, you look down into the gym. We do have a multi-purpose space up here. So when the bishops or popes come and they want to address the congregation, they can be up above, talking down to the congregation that is actually congregating within the gymnasium area. As Mark mentioned, this is going to be used for either pre-service or post-service functions for them to gather. Currently, they have to the east a very small room, approximately about a third of the size of this gymnasium, which is set up as sort of a fellowship hall. And it does not meet the growing congregation that attends mass at this sanctuary. We have looked at photometrics, and what we have found out from our photometrics, we have no light bleed going onto the neighboring properties to either the east or to the north or the south. Pretty much most of the light levels are maintaining themselves up to the curb of the green space adjacent to the building. Past that, the driveway and everything, we have no light bleed. There's maybe a little bit in this area here, but that's only about 12 feet into the driveway area. We are extending a drop-off pickup zone, so if, or actually it's no parking zone actually, but it's just so that if somebody is picking up or dropping off, they have access to the church. It is a no parking zone fire lane currently, so they will not be allowed to park there continuously. Rendering wise, aerial photo, taking a look at the addition and the sanctuary in the back. The is right now targeted for roughly 26 plus feet. The existing one-story building, which is the daycare, currently the north wall of the daycare has a height of, wrote it down here, one moment, has a height of 14 feet, while the south end has a height of 19 foot 11. So the current building is, almost 6 feet lower than the new building. So we're not like towering over the existing structure. In comparison to the sanctuary, we are lower than the sanctuary. We have two main entrances into the area. Entrance on the south, which lets you into the gym, and then we have the entrance on the west, which allows you into the classroom section, as well as to get into the daycare area. From a security standpoint, we have looked at providing locking doors as well as removable gates, so that as members are bringing or kids into the daycare, they can't just wander throughout the entire complex. They are pretty much ushering the children down the main corridor directly into the daycare area. So we did take a look at that so that, we're not going to have people running around the building, unknowingly. As Ben had showed, we do have a view coming in on the drive. The windows, in concern regarding light bleed into the neighborhoods, the top of these windows are 17 feet. The berm and the 90+% of coverage to the south, the berm is roughly 4 feet tall. The last time I measured the trees is when we did the parking lot expansion, and we were measuring those pine trees at 16 to 20 feet. So the pine tree and the berm and the green screen currently are taller than what the windows are on the building, and are almost as tall as the overall building is, and will just continue to get taller since they will be growing still. So we did take that in consideration. As you can see in the rendering, we are carrying over the limestone details at the cornice. We're using the beige brick as the field brick. We do have the foundation brick, which of the rust color. And then we are infilling panels with a patinaed metal and stainless steel to match the existing sanctuary. Again, trying to create that harmonious design of the project. Another view from the rear. Also, for safety measures, we did not allow any of the doors to run directly out into the parking lot. All the doors are right angles to the parking lot, as well as we provided gates to basically direct the people leaving the building to go around to allow them to see if cars are coming or driving by with that parking lot. The parking lot, I can say, because there was a question regarding the parking, we have currently 827 occupants in the sanctuary. At the rate of parking, we need 276 spaces, and we are currently providing on-site 332 spaces. So we have actually an excess of 56 parking spaces from what we need for the zoning ordinance. We did do a night shot just so we can show that you are not going to get a ton of light bleed that will be affecting the neighbors. And then the actual other side too, these are classroom windows. Again, those will be during daytime hours, predominantly during the times of sanctuary being used in mass. So again, you're not going to have a lot of light bleed. And then we also do have over 34 feet of setback on this side, and we do have quite a bit of tree coverage on that side. Ben did show the two shots. This is to the south. If you look at it, and basically right here, where my cursor is circling is where the addition would be going. And as you can see right now, that pine trees are covering up taller than what we already currently have on the existing sanctuary building. And then this is the prop looking from the north towards the building, and the addition would end up being placed over here to the left. And then beyond this building, you wouldn't see it again with the current coverage that we have going on in that area there. We do intend on doing landscaping and providing a landscape plan. We are showing foundation landscaping between the walkways in the building to south of the building, and we are also planting new trees along the existing driveway to again help with the screening of the building from the neighboring properties. I think at this point I clarified some of the questions that we have, and I'll open the floor up for anybody that may have some additional questions for me that I can answer.
With that, anyone from the commission like to raise a question or comment to the architect or the board member of the church? Seeing none, I just want to say my only concern is a sound from the basketball court. Is there any provision made for sound absorbing material on that to be the south wall I don't think it's going to go to the north side because there's classrooms there, but
Correct. We're going to have, the north side's not going to be affected. As for the noise emanating from the building, we're looking at a couple of different systems for construction on this. One of them being a sandwich concrete precast wall panel as the basis of the actual formwork of the building, and then the brick is being applied to the outside of it. That will have insulation embedded within that panel to mitigate some of the sound, as well as the thermal mass of allowing the sound just to travel through a solid piece of either concrete block or concrete wall or a stud wall with just insulation. That side also, we have the bleachers going up against it, so the bleachers are going to help deflect some of that noise coming through in that area. And then we are going to look at the glazing as we get into design development, construction documents, make sure that we have proper glazing in place, whether it's going to be a triple pane or we're bringing in some different laminates and everything to help kind of mitigate any sound transmission through whatever windows are within the area, the gymnasium as well.
just to follow up on that, those black areas where you defined it as metal panels, are there any, is that any dark windows involved in that we don't see, or is that's all metal all the way?
That is all opaque surface there. There's no windows located within those panels there.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, then I'm going to open up the public hearing. I guess we have already received a number of emails. Is there someone from the staff that wants to just do a head count on that or review? We do have, every commissioner has received the email comments from the public.
That is correct. We received emails from Suzanne Conover, from David Bemis, and from Mary Ann Howell. And those, as you indicated, were presented to the Planning Commission earlier.
Is there any voice messages that we should listen to from the public for this public hearing?
No, there are no voicemails for this
Okay.
agenda item.
So at this point, we need a resolution to continue this item till our next meeting in 2 weeks. Who would like to move that? Mr. Roush. And second from Mr. Tago, got his hand up there first. Okay, we'll need a roll call on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. It took a while for my microphone to come on.
No,
Ms.
it's okay. I've
Paredes?
had issues today too.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krent,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that leads us to the next item. It's a public hearing for street vacation. Does anybody need a break at this point? Hearing none, seeing no hands, then I'll continue. This is item number 8, public hearing street vacation request, file number SV 2020-001, public walkway east of John R. and north of Big Beaver, abutting 3512 Euclid on the north and 3506 Euclid on the south, section 24, currently zoned R1C, one family residential district, abutting properties. Who's going to present on this one? Mr. Savada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rather than share the screen, I'm really going to be speaking about some aerial photos. So if you would, in your packet, go towards the back of the document to page 104, and I'll kind of walk you through this. So the applicants for this are two families in Troy, Charles and Rebecca Snell of 3512 Euclid and Teresa Brown of 3506 Euclid. give you a very brief history. Both of those parcels are in a subdivision known as Beaver Creek subdivision. It was platted, approved in 1992. And as part of that plat, there was a 15-foot wide, 125-foot long public pathway that was required to be included in the plat. It was never developed with an actual hard surface pathway, but it's there. It's what we call a paper path. So it exists on paper, but there's nothing there. At the time in 1992, the property to the east was a large lot. I think there was one home on it. It may have been vacant. I don't recall. But it was not an 11-unit site condominium at the time. That didn't happen until 2012 when that development was approved. And you'll notice that there was not a reciprocal pathway in Tuscany Estates to the east when it was developed. There's a home and a detention basin. So what we have here is essentially a path to nowhere. And I believe Mr. Snell can chime in, but he indicated to the staff that that the public walkway is unnecessary because it doesn't lead anywhere. But what it does do is it's like an attractive nuisance for people that want to walk on from Tuscany Estates to this development. They walk in basically what's functionally his yard, and it really serves no purpose. However, I would note that if you go forward 2 pages in the document, page 106, we provided an aerial photograph with utilities. There's a 12-inch sanitary sewer line that essentially runs in that pathway. So the city has no issue with vacation of the pathway functioning for the purposes of walking, but we will want to retain an easement for the underground utilities so that nothing happens above the underground utilities. And we also want to restrict it so that no buildings or fences or any structures or buildings can be constructed on top of it. But it is a city's pathway. It's essentially like a right of way. We have no issues with vacation. What will happen if it is vacated of that 15-foot wide pathway, 7.5 feet will go to 3512 Euclid, 7.5 feet will go to 3506 Euclid. Staff supports this with the conditions that I referenced earlier.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Sabadan from our commission? Ms. Parakis, go ahead.
I don't know what the legal implications of this are, but given what appears to be a pretty easy decision, are we able to propose that we would just move on this one tonight and not postpone it, given that we didn't have any, I think that there was no opposition to it from the public, but I don't know if that's going to be viewed as unfair, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. We could knock something off our list since it seems relatively straighteward, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, we talked about that, Ms. Parakis, and it's whatever the board is comfortable with. I'm comfortable in terms of notice and opportunity to be heard. Our notices were appropriate that were originally went out. We've done what we needed to do to give people an opportunity to be heard. So I tend to agree with you that if the board is comfortable making a decision today without tabling it to another week, I'm comfortable with that as well.
So with that, can we just get a show of hands? How many would be comfortable just resolving this minor issue today?
You still need to open the public hearing.
Oh, yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Even before I get a hand count.
Okay.
Okay, do that again, please. I was a little bit distracted.
Sorry.
Hands, how many would be comfortable resolving this tonight? Sounds good. Okay, at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I would note that we did get an email. It was an email of support from Matt Pryor, who resides close by.
Okay, good to hear.
And Mr. Snell, one of the applicants, is in attendance right now.
Okay. Would Mr. Snell want to say anything?
No, I'd appreciate it if the support to resolve it tonight. I know there's been a sign that's been up for about 6 months now, maybe a little bit less, but something like that, much longer than was normally up for any vacation type like this. So I appreciate it.
Before hang just a minute, Ms. Barakis, unless you're part of the public open, I mean, our public comment for the public hearing. Are there any other comments for the public hearing?
There are no voicemails for this agenda item, Mr. Kren.
Okay, there are none, you said.
Correct.
Thank you. Well, hearing that we have no other comments from the public, I'm going to close the public hearing. Ms. Barakis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I had a question for, I believe his name is Mr. Snell, in terms of the nuisance. I mean, I don't know if were people using, I'd be curious to know what the problem was. Were people gathering there, or was it being used by the public in any way that we need to be aware of?
Yes, there was no gathering, but there were frequent crossings of that between the two streets. I've actually got a Ring video camera and purposely put it up in that location to capture the people and be notified when people were cutting across through there, and have had actually had put up signs that says private property, do not trespass on my area of that side, because they were coming so close to actually my property where it's like, is it my property or is it not? So this would help resolve it completely.
Okay, thank you for that info. Do you have any other comments from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to have someone make a motion to approve this street vacation or not.
And it would be a motion, a recommendation for city council, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
recommendation. Correct. Recommendation for council. Who would like to recommend this to go to council? Mr. Roush? Mr. Roush, and second would be from Mr. Lambert. Any discussion on this before we go to a vote? Mr. Savadat?
Just to confirm that the recommendation was to move the resolution as provided, which had two conditions. One, for retention of easements by the city, and two, that no structures or buildings be constructed over that area.
That's correct. And right, Mr. Roush?
That is correct.
And Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
He says yes. Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Savadan. Okay, at this point, we'll have a roll call. Mrs. Sarnecki?
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Miss Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you for that. Okay, at this point, we're going to go to number 9, proposed text amendment submitted by Planning Commissioner Jerry Roush. Mr. Roush, would you like to give us a little input on what you're proposing?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This issue involves this section of the zoning ordinance that has actually been brought up a couple of times before the Planning Commission with previous neighborhood nodes proposals, and also discussed at length with Mr. Savidant on the same issue. So it's not something that the staff is not familiar with. It's something that's been raised previously. And what I was trying to accomplish at our last meeting was to complete an objective that I started in January. And that was, I sent off a memo to Mr. Savidant asking for staff to review the proposed text amendment and provide the pros and cons of that amendment, so that at that point I could bring it before the Planning Commission as a proposed resolution, and we would have the staff's recommendations or what they thought were the pros and cons of the resolution. So that was my goal at the last meeting. Obviously, it didn't come through very clearly. So for this meeting, I provided a copy of in my memo, the section of the zoning ordinance as it reads today, And as I would amend it, I think that technically from a pure strict interpretation, that this amendment, if it was adopted, would actually be a benefit from the current strict interpretation of the ordinance. It would be a benefit to developers. But again, what I'm asking tonight for the Planning Commission to do is to direct Mr. Savant to, with Mr. Carlisle, to review the proposed amendment and report back in a couple weeks with the pros and cons to the proposal.
Very good. I'm just looking at your suggestion here, and could you just give us, just for our edification, you've eliminated the word street and put public or private street in residential developments that abut a residential district. So, I mean, give us a little bit of a verbal history or a story. What does it accomplish?
So this is similar in some respects to the question that I put before Mr. Carlisle earlier this evening. The design standards, like the standards for review and the issue on the setback on all of the boundaries of the site that we looked at earlier, the setback provisions and the bulk regulations, those supersede the individual setbacks as it relates to side yards and front yards and rear yards, in stating what the perimeter setback would be for all of the boundaries. In this particular entrance, the design standards require that the primary entrance for a building, so the front of the building, the front door of the building, must front on a facade that's parallel to the street. The zoning ordinance even provides a hyperlink to the word street to show you what that means. And in our zoning ordinance, it basically describes it as a thoroughfare and public roadway. And if you look at, if you do any further research, you would see that the standard for definition of a public street or thoroughfare would include a street that is being maintained by the city. In a number of the neighborhood node applications that have occurred, there is no public street for the buildings to front on. So the staff has believed that it doesn't apply and has not required the applicant to have a public street for the front door. So my goal here was to make it perfectly clear that a street, whether it's public or private, would be used for the front of the building. And this would have allowed, it would have been in compliance if that language was in place. That would make plans similar to what have been presented as being in compliance with the ordinance. So that's where this came from. Because the staff was not looking at it within strict wording of the zoning ordinance, I thought this would make it clear and there wouldn't be any questions in the future.
I see. I'm still a little bit fuzzy about it. So give us an example of maybe what happened in maybe some either hypothetical situation or something that arose that you saw in the past that this would help clarify our ordinance.
So if you were to have if we had looked at the example that we looked at tonight, if that was a neighborhood node and we were developing that, and the street that ran through the middle of the property and we reversed the houses so that the houses faced, the front of the house faced the wetlands. And these were 3-story buildings. I should say that they are buildings with garages on the first floor, and the upper levels being the residence, similar to the buildings that we've seen in neighborhood note applications. So if that center street had the roadways there, and that street drove into driveways that went underneath the building, and the front of the building faced the wetlands, that would not be in conformance with the ordinance, because the front of the building didn't have, the primary building entrance didn't have a public street that it fronted on. Only, and then on top of it, the neighborhood notes goes on further and talks about requirements for driveways and parking, and those have to be at the rear of the property off of an alley. So that roadway that runs through the middle of the property would not have been qualified. If you put a primary entrance there, wouldn't have qualified as a street, and it's not a public right of way, so it wouldn't have qualified either.
Okay, I can see what you're saying. Any thoughts from the commissioners? Mr. Hudson?
Couple thoughts. I know exactly what Mr. Roche is talking about, and I've been bothered by that for some time. He asked, and I think he's had some conversations with Brent and Ben over the last month or two. Do we really need, and I'll address this to Brent or Ben, do we really need more time for you to study this, or have you already reached a conclusion as to the request? And if so, what is it?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Sabadat or Mr. Carlisle.
Have I studied it? No, I have not studied it. Have I thought about it? I've thought about it, but I have not studied it. I think there's a difference. I think that, I guess I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around what the intent of this is. If the intent is to protect abutting single-family residential neighborhoods, the Planning Commission has worked on some provisions that will be going before City Council in the very near future, because we can now hold virtual public hearings. My guess is within the next 1 or 2 months, it'll be going before City Council, and that will protect abutting single-family residential neighborhoods by maximum heights of 2 stories and minimum setbacks. So I think there's protection there. And I mean, have I done an analysis of it as requested suggested by Mr. Rausch? No, I have not.
Mr. Hudson, if I may jump in.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Mr. Rausch has run this by Director Savanah and I a few times. I'll be perfectly clear. I'm still having trouble understanding what. I don't understand the language that we need to clear up. I think what would be easier for Brent and I to understand is what the particular concern Mr. Rauch has, and rather maybe look at how we can address it that way rather than change this language, because this language may not clarify what he's trying to achieve. I'm still struggling to understand what the request is and what the issue is. So I think that would be a little easier is if we tried to understand what we're trying to clear up or prevent, rather than change a specific language that may be even more confusing for us to apply moving forward.
Okay. Well, all right. I was ready to move a resolution as Mr. Roche proposed, but if you both think that you need more time to take a look at it and make a report back to us, so be it.
Well, I think what would help Mr. Hudson is I think Brent and I should sit down with Mr. Rauch and go through it with more detail about what the actual concern is, so that we can understand it. Because as presented, I still have a little bit of confusion as to what the concern is, I guess. Unless Director Savanah is more clear than I am right now.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
we can do that.
No, go ahead, guys. You can carry on the discussion on this one. I'm not gonna, I don't have to be the conversation cop on this one.
I think that the objective here is for the, if staff would used the strict language of the zoning ordinance, there would be no need for this amendment at all. So if you're looking for what my goal is here, my goal is for the primary entrance of these buildings to front on a street, whether it's a public or a private street. The end result of that happening is you end up with less density in terms of the number of units that you can place on an acre of land. And if you were to take a look at examples like if you want specific examples, Livernois and Livernois and Square Lake Road. That's one of the neighborhood nodes that was developed with homes like that. And I'm going from memory, so I may make a mistake, but the western boundary of the buildings, the buildings on the western boundary, I believe all of them, the primary entrance faces the residences at the rear. There is no street. There's a sidewalk that gets to them. So if they had to have had a street to be able to have those buildings, you probably would not have been able to put all of those buildings on that perimeter there. If you looked at the Crooks Road townhomes, the buildings on the northern boundary didn't front on a street. And then in addition to that, the buildings in the center of the property didn't front on a street. So this, if you want to see a good example of what happens when you do this, you make them front on a street, you can go look at the development at the southwest corner of Maple and Coolidge. So there's a very large development there of townhome style buildings, and those buildings all front on streets, and the driveways are at the rear of the building. It's an alley, technically an alley, the way the zoning ordinance reads, for the parking. You end up with, and again, density is a word that is not necessarily really good in being descriptive. It means some things to professional planners, and it means something to people like me. And it's the number of buildings you end up per acre. It's built. I guess it shows up as building mass or whatever, and it makes the developments look not as intense. Kind of like the thing with the 40-foot setback on the site plan tonight, as it related to those two homes. It did have an impact on the number of buildings that you put in there. You would have lost a couple. You would have gained some distance between the other buildings. But where it kind of stands out is that ends up kind of being in your face when you end up having those buildings that are that close to the street, and the buildings adjacent to it aren't. It just makes it stand out more. I think you get the same kind of effect with that kind of density. So that was my goal. My goal was to see if we couldn't use this zoning ordinance the way it's written, or in the alternative, to try and make it clear that it's public and private streets. Because technically, Crooks Road's townhomes, if it was only public streets, only the buildings on Crooks Road would have complied with the strict interpretation of the zoning ordinance as it's written. So I thought this actually would be beneficial from comparison to the strict wording of the zoning ordinance.
Okay, well, Ben or Brent would like to meet with Mr. Roush at some point and kind of trade thoughts and see how. If you guys feel it's necessary to me to understand, I'd be happy to sit down with you, but I thought it was pretty clear. Okay. What do you think, Mr. Sabadat?
We can do that.
Very good. Mr. Faison, you had a comment there?
Just a question. So this sounds like it's neighborhood node specific.
Yes,
We're going to kick off the master plan process and focus on the neighborhood nodes? Should this be dealt with as part of that as opposed to a one-off adjustment? It seems like it should be part of the whole thing we look at. That's
Go ahead, Mr. Sabanan, and go ahead.
That was my opinion, that we're doing a deep dive into the neighborhood nodes. We're even talking about doing some site visits and really jumping into neighborhood nodes, because this is one of the major issues that both the Planning Commission and City Council wanted to address. So I felt, and I think I don't want to speak for Ben, but I think he agreed with me that would be an appropriate time to do a deep dive versus doing one small tweak now, and then further tweaks later. A more comprehensive analysis of what we're the nodes and various issues, and we could include this at that time if it was appropriate.
And Mr. Sabanan did raise that issue after my proposal in January. That was his response, and as opposed to coming back with pros and cons. And my problem again is that we're not as long as the staff is going to use the strict language of the zoning ordinance, I'd have no problem with waiting until the neighborhood nodes is addressed during the master plan. But I got a feeling that the staff is going to want to continue to present plans as in compliance with the zoning ordinance when the application, when they clearly are not in the strict wording of the language of the zoning ordinance.
Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
Well, I think that Mr. Roush is raising a really important point, and all I will add is I don't know that I would be in favor of going to the zoning ordinance to change the zoning ordinance to bring us into compliance with decisions we've made. I think it's more important that we are very careful in applying a strict compliance to the zoning ordinance. There's definitely areas where we are, there's discretion by the wording, but this would not, there's definitions of street. And if what Mr. Roush is saying is correct, which I believe he is, because I did look at it, then we need to be applying a strict interpretation. That would be my response. I don't know that I'd be in favor of amending the zoning ordinance retrospectively, because we've approved plans that were in violation of it. And the one that comes to mind for me is Waddles and Crooks. There were two developments that were presented that I think were in violation of this.
Any other thoughts from members of our commission? So is just a quick question for Mr. Sabanan. If this isn't adopted, let's say eventually this kind of language will be adopted at some point in the new master plan, is there something right now that we should move it forward, or some other unwanted or unseen problems will arise if we don't do this now?
Well, again, I think there are short-term protections in place that, including limiting the height of buildings that abut single-family residential neighborhoods and increasing the minimum setbacks. So in the short term, I think the Planning Commission has taken steps to protect neighborhoods that could potentially be impacted by new development. We also have discretionary standards related to compatibility that you'll recall the Planning Commission applied and actually denied the Crooks Road Townhome project based on those compatibility standards. So we do have protection in place because you've recently denied a project based on compatibility standards.
Mm-hmm. So you don't see an imminent situation that we should resolve at this point, and it can wait until we thoroughly address the master plan. Is that what you're saying?
At such time that the City Council approves the proposed text amendments, yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Well, I still think it's probably a good idea for Mr. Roush and Mr. Sabanan or Mr. Carlisle to get together with Mr. Roush and have him feel comfortable with this. And if not, Mr. Roush could report back to the commission and say, I don't feel comfortable for some reason, and let us know. There's nothing else that I could say. Mr. Hudson, do you have any comment on this?
Well, not really. I'm kind of an impatient man, and when I see a possible solution to one of the things Mr. Roush is concerned about, I like to do it right away. I'm afraid sometimes that when we talk about these things, in fact, I remember some years ago when our city manager was the planning director, and he would listen to comments and he'd nod his head and say something. And when somebody got a little upset because nothing was happening, he said, look, this planning commission works through its resolutions. If you feel that strongly about something, you pass a resolution, we'll take a look at it. I don't know if I go that far tonight, but I hate to see this thing pushed off into maybe a new proposed amendment to the master plan a year from now.
Okay.
My thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something?
Of course.
So, you know, the final arbiter of a zoning text amendment lies with city councils, and city council is going to be asking questions of Ben and Brent about the propriety of making the change that Mr. Roush is proposing. So I think until Ben and Brent are comfortable with the basis for making the change, I'm not sure it's appropriate to move a resolution forward, you know, making a change to the zoning ordinance. I just, like I said, this council has the final say in what the zoning ordinance says. So to move something forward without being fully, you know, aware of what the issues are, I'm just not sure that's provident.
Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
I just want to say that, you know, this proposal is to change the zoning ordinance, so it has nothing to do with master plan. So I don't know if we need to wait for master plan discussions. It's my thought.
Okay. So where do we stand?
Mr. Chairman, I've made myself pretty clear to Mr. Savinant and Mr. Carlisle in the past. They can see the issue. I think it's very simple for them to come back with the benefits and disadvantages of this text amendment, so that the planning commission decide what they need to do, if anything, at that point in time. But to put it off, you know, I think it's just going to be. You know, I started this in January, thinking it would be simple to get it moving. Having more meetings, I think, is just going to delay the issue. We'd be better off hearing what they have to say and making a decision after that.
Go ahead, Mr. Savinant.
I just want to say something. I'm the liaison for 5 boards and committees. It's a lot of boards and committees. Planning Commission has 9 members. City Council has 7 members. Sustainable Development Review Committee has 5 members. I could go on. If I did a cost benefit analysis or any type of analysis every time there was a request, I wouldn't get anything done. So what I would request is, if you want me to take action on this, I need a majority of Planning Commission to vote by resolution to advise me to do so.
Yeah, that's fair. Mr. Lambert, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest or ask, it's kind of a follow-up what Mr. Savinant said, is does he need a resolution for us to proceed forward with, to investigate the pros and cons on this, or is he just comfortable going off and doing it?
At this point, I would appreciate a resolution.
Okay. Mr. Faison, go ahead.
So just a question. So we referenced the project at Square Lake in Livernois, and I think the comment was it did not comply with the ordinance as written. So did we approve a project that was at variance with the zoning ordinance?
So
asking staff that question.
I think we need to be very, very careful to say such things as we didn't comply with our zoning ordinance or something, because I think there's, you know, Ben and Brent, who are our experts that this board relies on, are saying we did not comply with the ordinance. So, like I said, this discussion is making me a little nervous because I don't want there to be appearance out there that the city's not following its own ordinances. Because I don't think that's what Ben and Brent have advised this board ever to not comply with its own ordinances.
And yeah, I wasn't trying to take it to a place like that. I was just
No, I
trying
wasn't.
to
That was more a
understand.
general comment, Mr. Faison. I mean, a couple commissioners have said the same thing about not complying with the ordinance. So, and I didn't mean to direct that directly to you. I just, it's a general comment.
No, and that's fine. I mean, I made the comments. I get it. I just wanted you to know I was really trying to understand, because I would agree. I did not think that we did something that was at variance with the ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Tagle.
A little different than most of you, I work with ordinances as my job. I work with building codes as my job. And there's always interpretations. The attorneys on the commission here understand that the words can be interpreted different ways. And there are reasons why things may be interpreted one way or another. So, you know, I don't know if we're thinking we're going to get something down in black and white that's going to, you know, clear this path forever and ever. I'm not so sure that we're going to get there. But I do think it's worth discussion at our level, at the commission's level. And quite honestly, I hear what Mr. Roush has said with a couple of examples he's given. But I also think there's got to be some latitude with what a developer comes in with. And if it's so rigid that it's going to develop, so I can't build the project, or you're turning the projects upside down. We're not here to design their projects for them, but they do have to comply with the ordinances the city has, and the rules and the laws of the city and of the state. So, you know, I just think that I don't know. I don't know how you could ask anyone, is there an urgency to this? How do you know what's coming down the road? How do you know what the project will look like? I do agree with Mr. Faison's comment earlier about we are going to be studying these nodes. This should be part of the study. Some of us on this commission remember before we did the master plan, we had 130 some text amendments. So they did this over a multi-year period. We don't want to go down that path again, not that we're going to. So I just think we need to look at this in the bigger context of the nodes and what these concerns might be, what the problems that may be raised. Thanks.
Okay. So we're kind of in the middle ground here. No real, unless someone wants to move a resolution to have Mr. Sabadan or Mr. Carlisle explore this, the pros and cons of it, it's a dead issue. So does somebody want to move a resolution? Mr. Roush.
Yes, I'll make a resolution that the Planning Commission direct staff to review the proposed zoning ordinance amendment presented by Mr. Roush's March 29th, 2021 memorandum, and advise of the impact of those changes to the existing ordinance.
Get a second for that. Mr. Hudson seconds it. I guess we'll need a roll call now. Ms. Sarnicki, could you please give us a roll call? Oh, Mr. Tagle, well, yeah, okay, we got discussion on it. Go ahead, Mr. Tagle.
Exactly. Now your resolution was to have staff review this, come back with the pros and cons. Is that the extent of what you're asking them to do right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments before we take a vote? Mr. Hudson, do you have a comment? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button.
That's okay. Ms. Sarnicki, please give us a roll call.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krant,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Ms. Malahali,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Okay, the next item is Planning Commission comment. Do we, I guess I'll just go right down the list on my screen. So, Ms. Parakis, do you have anything?
Only to say that I was disappointed that we didn't get to all meet in person tonight. I was looking forward to that. But one day we'll see everyone. But for now, we'll just take your faces on the screen.
Great.
Good to see everyone.
Yep, you too. Mr. Roush,
No, thank you. I've taken up enough of your time.
Mr. Rahman,
I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Faison.
Just reiterate, I think it was good to see a project with those 1,800 square foot ranches with the first floor master baths, like that development that we felt that folks in Troy were looking for. So, but that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Tagle,
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Lambert.
I was just going to thank city staff for quickly rearranging everything after city council last night called an audible on this in-person meeting. So thank you very much.
Well said. Ms. Malala.
I'd like to second what Mr. Lambert said. Thank you, Jackie, for giving us all the required information to have a successful meeting today. Thank you.
Mr. Hudson.
No comment, thank you.
And I'll just say, reiterate those comments, thanking staff, and I guess we'll go to adjourn now. Bye all.
Bye-bye.